What is the framing effect? The framing effect is when the way information is given affects how we think about it and what we decide to do with it. Different ways of presenting the same knowledge can make it more or less interesting. Where this bias occurs. Think about the following situation. John goes to his neighborhood pharmacy to buy wipes that kill germs. He sees a few choices, but the only ones for sale are two containers of wipes. One is called Bleachox and the other is Bleach-it. John is deciding between two types of cleaning wipes that cost the same and have the same number of wipes in each package. John sees that the only difference is that Bleachox wipes say they kill 95% of germs, while Bleach-it wipes say that only 5% of germs survive. John picks the Bleachox wipes after comparing them to the other ones. He doesn't like the idea of germs surviving on his kitchen counter. The frame effect played a role in John's choice to buy Bleachox instead of Bleach-it wipes. Even though both items were good at killing germs and said pretty much the same thing, they said it in different ways. Bleachox showed how many germs it did kill, which was a good thing, while Bleach-it showed how many germs it did not kill, which was a bad thing. Individual effects. The frame effect is when people make decisions based on how the information is presented instead of the information itself. Such decisions may not be the best, since bad knowledge or fewer options can be made to look good. This may make them more appealing than choices or information that are better in reality, but look worse. Think of someone who makes a bad choice because their broker only told them about the good things that could happen instead of the bad things that could happen. Or think of a person who votes for a protectionist candidate because the media only told them about the bad things that happened because of past trade deals. Systemic effects. The framing effect can have a big effect on how people feel about something. Public matters and other things that get people's attention can be seen in very different ways depending on how they are presented. Sometimes problems or positions that help most people can be seen in a bad light because they are framed in a bad way. In the same way, policy positions and behaviors that don't help the public good may become popular if their good points are stressed well. For example, there is a lot of proof that climate change will cause huge costs in the future and that low-income communities will pay a disproportionate share of those costs. Even so, there are a lot of voters in North America who don't believe in climate change and think policies like carbon taxes will hurt the normal person. This could be because some news outlets and politicians have framed climate change as a scientifically controversial problem. They also often talk about the short-term costs of environmental policy. Why it happens, how words, references, and stress are used to describe options affects how we decide between them. Most of the time, a choice is shown in a way that emphasizes either the positive gain or the negative loss. We tend to fall for this kind of thinking because we don't like to lose. We avoid loss. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's important work, which they called prospect theory, describes how framing works. This theory says that a loss is seen as more important and therefore more important to avoid than an equal gain. A sure gain is better than a likely gain, and a likely loss is better than a sure loss. We look for choices and information that give us a sure gain because we don't want to lose money for sure. The way something is put into words can change how sure we are that it will be good or bad. Because of this, we like it when the good things about a choice are stressed instead of the bad things. Our brain uses shortcuts. It takes time and energy to process and evaluate knowledge. Our minds often use shortcuts, or heuristics, to make this process go faster. The framing effect may be caused in part by the availability and impact heuristics. When making decisions about the future, we tend to use knowledge that comes to mind quickly and easily. This is called the availability heuristic. Studies have shown that the framing effect is more common in older adults. This is because older people have less brain power and are more interested in information that is easy to understand. We prefer information that is easy to understand and remember, so choices that are set up in this way are more likely to be chosen than those that aren't. The effect heuristic is a method in which we make decisions based mostly on how we feel instead of taking the time to think about what will happen in the long run. This could be why we like information and choices that are presented in a way that makes us feel something right away. Researchers have found that framing is based on emotional pleas and can be made to make people feel a certain way. Imagine this. Most of us would be more likely to listen to and vote for a political candidate whose platform is given in an emotional speech aimed at inspiring change, rather than in a boring report. Why it is important. The framing effect can affect our lives in both good and bad ways. As was said above, it can make it harder to make decisions by making bad information or fewer choices look better. In other words, if we pay too much attention to how something is said, its framing, we might not pay enough attention to what is being said, which is generally more important. So we may choose worse options or information that is presented better than better options or information that is presented badly. This is true for both the smaller choices we make as consumers and citizens and the bigger choices we make in our personal and work lives. But we should also know about this effect because we can use it to our benefit. When we know that framing affects how people think and act, we can pay more attention to how we offer information we want other people to accept and act on. Knowing that people are drawn to frames that highlight certain benefits can help us show our work in a way that makes it more appealing and effective. When working with other people or controlling them, it's important to remember how important how we present our message or position is. If we frame things better, we might be able to get more people to agree with us. How to avoid it? There are a few ways to lessen the effect of framing. Research has shown that framing effects are less likely to affect people who are more involved in a problem. You can think of involvement as how much you care about something. A study done in 2010 found that people who care about an issue are more likely to process persuasive messages in a systematic way and are more interested in learning about the product than people who don't care as much about the issue. People who were more involved were less likely to be affected by the framing effect. Those who were less involved were more likely to be affected. From these results, we can learn that we should think about our decisions about a problem and try to learn more about it. In fact, the authors say that earlier research has shown that framing bias would be reduced or eliminated if people thought more carefully about their choices, and that older adults made better decisions when they looked at more information relevant to the decision. A more specific strategy that fits with this more general plan is to explain why we made the choices we did. In a 1997 study, this was found to reduce the effects of framing because it pushed people to think about more details. This makes sense. If we really think about why we chose a certain option or relied on a certain piece of information, we might learn that the way it was presented had too much of an effect on our decision. How it all started. Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, two Israeli psychologists, were the first to study and show that the framing effect has an effect on how we make decisions. In 1979, they did the study that led to the prospect theory, and 2 years later, they wrote The Framing of Decisions and the Psychology of Choice, which was more focused on the effects of framing. In this study, Tversky and Kahneman asked people to choose between two ways to treat 600 people who had cancer that killed them. Treatment L would lead to 400 deaths, and treatment B had a 33% chance that no one would die, but a 66% chance that everyone would die. This was done by either showing how many people would live or how many people would die. When people were told that treatment A would save 200 lives, they were more likely to support it. But when they were told that 400 lives would be lost, only 22% of people supported it. This showed that how choices are presented can also affect how we choose. Example: plea bargaining in court. Framing effects have been shown to have an effect on how the law is applied. In a paper he wrote in 2004 U.S., law professor and Judge Stefanos Bibas looked at how different cognitive biases affect plea deals in court. He came to the conclusion that framing plays a powerful role in plea bargaining. Bibas said that suspects are less likely to accept plea deals because they see them as a loss frame. That is to say, suspects are less likely to agree to a plea deal if they are used to being free and will lose some freedom as a result, even if it is less freedom than they would lose if they were convicted without a deal. With a loss frame, acquittal is the starting point, and anything worse than that is a loss. Bybas thinks that this is good for the prosecutors because suspects often have something to gain from making concessions and negotiating. But he goes on to say that some suspects look at plea deals as a way to get something. A person who has been in pretrial detention for a long time is more likely to see prison as the baseline and eventual freedom as a gain, especially if freedom is possible in weeks or months. So, defendants are more likely to agree to a plea deal because they are often held in jail before their hearing.